Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Actually, now it's lunchtime. My name is Stuart Crawford, and welcome to our monthly webinar here with Intelice. In a few minutes, I'll be flipping it over to David Maxwell, who's going to talk to you about who done it. Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central webinar again for this month. For those that are not familiar with the GoToWebinar control panel, it'll be up on the screen. You can use that to ask any questions to David or myself, or use the chat function to message me. And if you have any problems seeing the screen or with the audio, as we just wait for everybody to come on. We are recording today's session as well, and it will be made available through the Intelice website shortly after the conclusion of our webinar today. So we'll get started here. I'm going to flip everything over to David Maxwell, who's going to run us through a very informative session this lunch hour. Take it away, David.
Sure. So welcome, everyone. This is a presentation on whodunit, which is kind of the question that you probably ask as a nav user as you're going through an audit process, or maybe there's something went wrong in the system and you want to kind of do some forensics to find out who added certain values in the system you aren't expecting, who's changed some setups. So we're going to go through the whodunit. And again, I'm David Maxwell. I'm a consultant with Intelice Solutions. And so I wanted to bring to your attention that we are also in the middle of a name change at Microsoft, formerly known as Microsoft Dynamics NAV, is now Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. So you see that on the title screen here. 365 BC is the shorthand for that. Just be aware that that is also kind of known as Dynamics NAV 2019, but they're completely renaming the brand. So let's move into the presentation. We have my agendas. I was just going to give you a quick overview of Business Central, the web client versus the Windows client, and then get into the changelog, and then the registers, and then other types of ways of finding out who done it. So what you're looking at now is what you're probably familiar with, which is Microsoft Dynamics NAV or Business Central, and this is called the Windows client. And the other client that is getting some prominence, particularly with the web and cloud versions, is this web client. The web client is going to be kind of part and parcel of the new kind of turnkey version of this, which is for the cloud, Dynamics 365 for the cloud. And you also have on-prem, which means that the servers are normally located in your company rather than on the cloud. So that's kind of the distinction here, but both will have this Windows view. This is the Windows client again, and you see that things are kind of different here. This is the home page for a person who logs in as an accounting manager, and things are basically reoriented. But otherwise, it's the same type of content. And we won't be looking at this any further today. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that we do have a different look and feel. We are in the verge of reorienting a lot of the way the software has looked in the past. But you'll still have access to your Windows client if you don't particularly care for this new look and feel. So first thing I want to get into was the changelog entries, and these are essentially, most systems are turned on. If you already have a working system for several years now, chances are someone's turned this on and is capturing data so that you can do some forensics and see who did some changes. This is the changelog entries screen, and in here we have a number of columns that represent the date that something had changed, who changed it, that's the user ID, and what table they changed. So in this case, this is the permission table. And this is Cronus. The Cronus database was set up by Microsoft, and their user ID was Europe something or other. And then the changelog is always turned on for changes to your permission settings and your changelog turning on and off. So without having it turned on, actually it's capturing some information already. So that's just showing the setups that Microsoft did in order to initialize the Cronus database. And we can see that in here we have that this permission table was changed for some security parameters and things like that. When we see the primary key here, it tells us a little bit of information about the record that was changed. Let me go into Windows. And one of the ways to quickly get to that table is to type in changelog in your search in the upper right hand corner of Windows. So changelog. log entries. And here you can see the exact same view that I had in my PowerPoint. And if I scroll through this, I'm just scrolling through this, you can see there's a whole lot that Microsoft has set up back in November. I've just sorted so that the most recent information is on top. And now you can see my user ID in here. And my user ID is IT/David.Maxwell. And in here we have, I changed the changelog setup and some permission set. Well, no, I didn't do that. This is what I've changed thus far. Now, there are different fields in here that I wanted to bring to your attention. Let's see. The main thing is that I showed you that some records are captured in the changelog automatically without you ever having to turn on changelog. And these are those tables. So access control is user logins, basically. The changelog setup is I'm going to get into, but it basically turns on and off changelog, so that's always captured. What tables you're going to capture in changelog are turned off, on and off, and fields that you're going to capture. And the last four have to do with user logins. So in other words, this is information that should always be captured because it's the most essential for access in Nav. So I'm going to go into how to activate the changelog and how to set up tables for changelog. And then after that, we'll do some tests. So changelog setup. The changelog setup is just a single button, very basic. It's either on or off. If I check it off, I'm actually creating records to changelog because this isn't one of those that's automatically captured. And then there's something called tables. This is where we declare what we want to capture to the changelog, and I'll select the tables. Let me just maximize it. It automatically took me to the very last record. I'm going to go to the first couple. And I show you that I've got the currency already set up. Let's go with payment terms. I'm going to capture the changes to payment terms that someone might do. And there are three types of activities that someone can do to a payments terms record. They could either insert it for the first time, modify that record, or delete that record. And you can make basic rules around what to do in each type of activity. I'm setting it up for all fields. Basically, that means any change on this table will be captured in the changelog. And you notice there when I drilled down, I had some fields and blank. Blank, of course, means I'm not going to capture anything. Some fields means I'm going to capture a portion. And I want to show you that I've set up some fields already here on the currency table. So in the currency table, I have an elliptical button here. The first set it to sum, and an elliptical button is to the right-hand side of that, where I can select which fields I'm going to show. So I've drilled in here, and in here I've selected that I'm going these to be tracked, and I've also got the insert, modify, delete as options. And I don't want to get field number 2 or field number 3 because this isn't going to tell me anything that I don't already know. I mean, it's just last date modified of the currency table is something that our changelog is already going to tell me. So I don't need this to get this as additional information. And these are judgment calls that you make. You know, you'll in time get used to what's important and what's not, but it's kind of good to select at the field level because you might get too many records coming into the changelog entries and it just becomes unruly at a certain point. So here we have a selection of, I want to see when people change the unrealized gains and losses accounts because I find that that's quite an important setup. And so I've checked those boxes. I've kind of left the rest of them blank, but you get the idea here. I'm basically selecting a subset of fields to track. So with those turned on, I can go out into the currency table and make some kind of change. And here's my currency. I guess I got the United Arab Emirates here, got an unrealized account. I'm going to edit my table. I hit the edit button there on there. And I might change this account, a couple of these accounts. So just randomly selecting account numbers and trying to basically just illustrate that this is being captured on the change log entries. And let's see what we got. So we see these changes I made. It's 1213, that's what my computer is saying. And we see those changes I made to the UAE currency realized gains and losses accounts. So that's the idea. Now let's go back to my slide presentation. This shows that basically what I just walked through. Now I wanted to make an important point that when I click that change log activate, I had to exit and then re-enter the system because it needs to initialize. And so really just by getting out of nav, so here I am, change log setup. So by being in here and clicking this box, it isn't enough to start capturing information right away. The currency information would not have shown right away after I check this box. I do have to exit and re-enter nav to initialize my changes. So this is something that's not written down anywhere that I'm aware of, but it's something that you would find if you were to actually experience this. So I want to go into some tips of using this screen, the change log entries. You see that over time there could be a lot of clutter. And so one of the things is you can, of course, set your filtering off of a table caption. And I want to see only currencies, not the other things, because the chances are you're going in here to look for a specific problem or a specific change and who did it. And so if I just put in currency, then I can see the breakdown of currency. I can add another date filter if I know that it happened prior to a certain date or after a certain date, then I can put in another filter. I could use a user ID. If I think I suspect who did it, I could put in a user ID to further filter. And this is just a basic filtering that you can do throughout nav, but it is an important feature of how you find whodunit. And if I wanted to, I could go even further down and save some of these views to basically come back to them later. Maybe there's a particularly critical set of tables or a certain table that you want to then track. You can save it as a saved view. And basically, I have to just quickly restart the system. And that saved view will end up on my navigation pane on the left. So here's my saved view. I click it, and now I've got a filtered view of my changes. So that could be useful as well. There are 3 other columns I want to talk about: the primary key, secondary key, and triary key. Basically, this is telling you the record that was changed. So some tables have 1 key field, other tables have 2 or 3 key fields. So in other words, these represent the unique record that was changed. When I was in currency, the unique record is defined as only as a code for that currency. And so I see AED representing, I think, the UAE currency. So the main thing is to know, how do I know this just has 1 primary key, or how do I find the record using all these 3 keys? And one of the ways is the zoom feature. I'm going to go to the currency table and show you what the zoom feature is. So here's my list of currencies. And sometimes the name of the page is not the name of the table. And sometimes the record it's not clear what the key is to the record. So one of the ways to find out both is to do Control-Alt F1 to bring up something. Well, that's essentially called zoom. It brings up something called About This Page. And About This Page will bring up an important piece of information called the source table. And you can see its name is currency. The page name is called currencies, and the source table is called currency. It's the source table that the changelog uses to track changes. There's also a number next to it, and I'll show you how you can use that number later and why you might. But there's a number that's basically represents a table. All right. Then the keys are in the Table Fields tab, and they're shown with a PK next to them. This is basically representative of what creates the unique record. So here it's only on a field called code, and the field number is 1. So back to our changelog entries for a second. We have the AED, and it's showing that the table name is currency, and the record is AED. And you can also add the table number here, and key numbers. So let me do table number and primary field number, and they're going to be added in here. They went over to the far left. And you see that the currency table is currency number 4. I mean, table number 4. And the primary key is number 1. Those correspond to the same thing we just saw in Zoom. And I'm only showing you this because you might filter on the numbers of the table instead of the name, because it's a lot faster. It'll help your speed in your search when you have a million plus records in this table. You know, this can grow quite large, quite fast, depending on how much information you're capturing. It's all going right into one single table, and because of the nature of the way the technology works, by using the table number, you basically can search faster. Same goes with the primary key field. So I'm just moving those fields over so you can see them a little faster. So if I were to filter on this, on 4, it went a lot faster than when I initially did the table caption. Maybe you saw a little bit of a latency when I was doing that. 1 Mississippi, you see that? That was just a fraction slower by filtering on the currency name rather than the table number. Now, for what I'm showing you today, there's hardly any records in this database, but imagine having a million in this particular table alone. You might be waiting a while if you're searching on the table caption. So that's a kind of an important point. I want to show you also what a compound key looks like when you have more than one key and you're using the zoom. I created this purchase invoice, and if we're on the line and I do Control-Alt F1, we have now the purchase line is the table, and it's table number 39, and the fields are in the table fields. Sarah will open it up. Took a minute, and there are 3 keys. This is what we call a compound key, and there are 3. And so if I were capturing information on the purchase line, which I want to caution you not to do everything, then I would get 3 keys going into the changelog. So this is what a compound key looks like. 3 PKs are in here, meaning there's 3 parts to the key. So I think the last thing I'd like to show you on the changelog entries is a report Many times what you'll end up with is an auditor will be asking you questions about the how something changed or when something changed. And so there is a report that gives a nice canned view of what changed, and I'm just running it from the change log entries itself. And you're going to want to modify this so you don't get an obscene number of records. And I'm just going to put in that I want to do table number 4. And basically I'm just doing preview. So this just puts together a list that you can print out. You can or email it, whatever you want with it, that you can give to auditors or some internal manager wants to know some information. This is one approach. But one of the things that we wanted, this is about tips and tricks, right? We want to make sure that you clear any kind of saved value you might have in that report, because later on it can and has in the past and earlier versions messed up the ability to do your test reports in various like journals. So you want to clear it out after you run it. Oh, I'm going to repeat that message also in the registers later on. So this is about it. You could also narrow down this and send the report to Excel. It's a popular method of also providing information out and distributed it. All right, so filtering tips and tricks. I don't know if we're running out of time. So I wanted to just tell you, now this will we can make available after this session, but some of the things that you should consider tracking in your change log is setups. Anything, actually, any table that contains the word setup is a good candidate for tracking. Your posting groups, and any kind of record that you update infrequently, payment terms, location, unit of measures, what I did earlier, the currencies are good. And then what I recommend when you set up something to track only some fields, I would do that on master data, bank accounts, vendors, customers, GL accounts. Well, I've got currencies in there too. So basically, anything you can, if you cherry pick what you're viewing on that, then you might not have as many records, because there's a lot of things that just don't need to be tracked. And then a warning, my third bullet there is a warning: do not track ledger entries. It's really not a good idea, or journal lines or documents, unless there's a specific field that you really are sensitive about. So I don't recommend, because of the sheer quantity of what it would be hitting the change log. And then I just wanted to make a point that a lot of our client base are nonprofit companies, and there is additional add-ins for Serenic Navigator. It's called, that's a nonprofit add-in for Microsoft Dynamics, and it's got ability to access the change log straight from a lot of the master records. And we've also done that for nonprofit companies that wanted a quick access, say from a bank card. That we have been able to put it on the ribbon filtered view for quick access. If that's something that you'd be interested in, you can reach out to us and we can do those customizations. All right, my second segment was about GL registers. And the GL registers are basically telling you when something was posted and who posted it and from where they posted it. And this is an example right here in red. I should point out 4 types of key pieces of information on your GL register that you look at first when searching for, how or when something was posted. Here we've got 3 records, and they were all created on November 13th by Microsoft when they built the Cronus company. And then there's the source code, and the source code says when from where those things were posted. And here it says sales. So these 3 transactions are actually sales orders or sales invoices. And if it had been posted from a journal, there would be also a journal batch name associated, but they weren't. These are documents that were posted. So let's take a look at GL registers. So those first 3 records are right here. And we see the source code is sales. I'm going to drill into the sales just to show you that there is a whole lot of other source codes. And these source codes represent the posting activity from where something ended up being posted. Select advanced so you can see the full-fledged amount of possible sources of posting. And a lot of these you'd hardly ever use, but they're in here to basically stamp the GL entries with the activity. Some of the more common ones would be the general journal that you would see, the purchases, and the sales is the one we just looked at, and so forth. So these are all called source codes, and they're set up initially by your system. Something that you shouldn't ever change except when you have beginning initialized your system. So it should be there, ready and active. So each of these represents a GL, since it's called GL registers, it represents a posting to the GL. And so I'm just going to highlight the first one and bring to your attention on the ribbon, navigation to the general ledger. So if I slip over here, I've got the general ledger entries that were created when that sales order was posted. And so we can see the transaction, the GL account. This would be the revenue account. This would be the AR account. And then there's some other activity that went on that transaction. And then we see entry numbers here. These are unique to the GL, and this would be the key. And these are associated with the GL register. So we see a filter has been set when I ran in here between 2084 and 2088. And you can see those names, those numbers filtered here. They correspond to the GL register. So I'm going to escape out of here and go back. You see here the from entry number, 2084 to 2088. And that's so it's from and to. So every time that a transaction is posted, it's making a number of entries to the GL, and it's creating a unique number for each of those entries. So you can basically look here and see how many entries were created by doing a differential. You know, this is 5, and this was 4. And so sometimes if you wanted to navigate the other direction, you could start with the GL, and then from the GL, move your way over to the GL register by taking this number. One of the questions you may ask is, you know that this was posted on January 13th, but I mean, you know that the posting date is January 13th, but you don't know when it was really posted. It could have been posted months after this or months before this. And then the other question is, well, who posted it? So that is where the GL register comes in. You would basically come over here, get this number, and then find which transaction that number, where that transaction fell, what range it fell in. And then you can find out that information. So you see that this one, this transaction that we were on, was created on November 13th by somebody at Microsoft, but the posting date is in January 13th. So anyway, they posted this into the future on that date. So that kind of gives you the why you would use the GL register from an audit perspective. There's other ways to look through and see what's going on here with these additional ledger links. To see the full ledger links, we can select navigate, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total here. And you kind of have to use your head a little bit based on the source code, what is the relevant ledgers? So everything is going to have a GL ledger, but if I'm on this, if I have a source code of sales, I'm not going to see anything in the vendor ledger. So it would only be a customer ledger. So click on customer ledger, and then I can see the entry for the customer ledger. Here's a GL entry. I don't know if there's any customer ledger information there. There is, because there happened to be a customer on that GL entry, but this is a little less clear. Came out of the default batch. This one is a purchase, so I'm not going to have any customer ledger information, I don't think, and I don't. So that, and that would probably have a customer and so forth and so on. So anyway, these are quick links to get to the subledgers as well as the general ledger. There's also a general ledger report that you can run on the GL register report. Is something that auditors ask for a lot. Notice that when I went in here, it's pre-filtered for 121. This is something you want to be cautious of, because when this number is saved, it'll mess up test reports that you have on journals later on. So you want to clear it out after you use this report. But I'm going to run it for 121 to give you an idea of what this looks like. 121 is just the register number, and it shows what was posted on that register. This is the same as the report, the report that would print when you select post and print off of a journal. Many people find out the hard way that they're trying to post and print, and what's printing out is inaccurate because the filter has been set when someone went into the GL register. So that's something you need to clear out, so that doesn't happen to people that are used to printing when they post a journal. Everything I said about the change log to filtering applies here too. So filter away, you can save your view as well, things like that. All right, now this isn't the only register in the system. If you type in registers in your search, you'll see all these other registers that pop up, and they all basically have the same type of structure and can be used for tracking down whodunit. And so I encourage you to go through these other registers and check out the what's in there. And that leads me to kind of my last set of tips, which is that the ledgers themselves do have the user ID on them and the source code on them. Want to show you that, let's see if we can get there with a change on the years. Let's see, there's the user ID and the source code. I'm going to add and add. We'll reopen the page for this. And so in other words, you can do a whodunit directly without going to the GL entries. You can do a whodunit directly off of the general ledger as well. And here I can see who the user is on the transaction. Here I can also see from whence the record came through the source code. And that's not just unique to the GL. It's also here and available on the subledger, and it's not shown from the initial setup. So I would go in and find those two values as well here on the subledger for our use. And so here we have who did it and from whence they did it. So those are important things just to note. Then this is another possibility is finding out who done it on workflow. Workflow in and of itself is going to be a different conversation and probably different training from us, but we've got workflow possibilities in your system, so you can set up who needs to do what when next. And I've set up an example here where we have a workflow set up on purchase invoices. I send it out the purchase invoice for approval, and I can see who done it by selecting off of my purchase invoice, the approvals button, to get to the approval entries button. And this shows me who approved it, who sent it, who the approver was. In this case, I was both the person that sent for approval and approved it at the same time. And it shows that the status is approved, but you could have complicated workflow. And so there would be a lot of different records in here, and you might ask the question, why did someone approve, or who approved it, and for how much did they approve it, and when did they approve it? Or you can find out who hasn't approved it yet, and other various questions on workflow. And then I was going to show you lastly a little known feature that is on user setups. This is a way of tracking how long a person has been in the system. Sometimes you want to track the user's time, if you want to see if they're actually doing what they say they should be doing, for example, or you might have user license issues and you want to micromanage that. You might turn on something called register time. So I'm in user setup, click the budget register time, and what that automatically does, it starts to create a log of people and how long they were in the system. So here I've got myself. I was in the system yesterday for 32 minutes. And since I've been talking to you, I've been in the system, I think, 22 minutes. So that gives you an idea of how this information is captured and used. That's Whodunit, and I hope you found it informative. And I'm now open for questions.
Hi, Dave. Yes, we have a couple questions came in during your presentation today. So one of them was, do I have to set up changelog in each company?
Oh, yeah. So if you are, well, this is an example, I guess. If I'm in Cronus USA, but if I hop over to Cronus Canada, the changes I made are not there. That's because each change log setup is done separately by company. So here we go. Yeah, this one's not activated. I'm in Canada now. And you can see I don't have any, it's blank. We set up the payment terms and the currency, but it's blank still.
Yeah, the next question that came in was, can I synchronize my changelog setups between companies?
Not really synchronize, although I've done a customization for a customer that wanted that because they didn't want to go through, well, they had 30 companies. They didn't want to go through each one by one when they were setting up. So I did do synchronization, but there is also, you can do a configuration package, which is a way, and you have to do this with your partner. It can be dangerous, but there is something called a configuration package that allows you to export all your changelog rules and then re-import them into another company. It's real quick and easy, but you might want to do it with your partner because it could override some of the records that you want to keep.
Fantastic. That's all the questions that have come in so far, David. Is there any last-minute closing comments that you want to extend before we wrap up today?
No, well, I would encourage you to do it today. If you haven't already, go into your changelog and start to track those setup tables, because we have some experience at Intelice where people have said everything's changed for whatever, and we want to know why, and we can't tell them because there hasn't been changelog set up. Or we've had clients that have deleted entire sets of records by mistake, and then we've been able to recover it for them. Not only did they delete the records, but they didn't have database backups, and we were able to use changelog to recover some of that data. So yeah, basically my parting thought for everyone is it's best to set up your changelog sooner than later so that you can make sure that you're capturing any kind of changes in important setups in your system.
Fantastic. And David, can you share the contact information one more time, just to make sure those that need it can get access to all of our resources?
Yep. Actually, I don't have a parting presentation slide that has much information on it, oversight on my part, but it's Intelice Solutions. You would want to reach us at www.intelice.com for any questions that you have. I personally can be reached at david.maxwell@intelice.com.
Fantastic, David. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Stay tuned for future Dynamics Nav / Business Central webinars coming up. Our next one will be in April. Watch your email for that. We'll be starting to send out invites early next week. And stay tuned for the recording of today's session if you want to recap things that David shared with us today. It'll be made available shortly within the next couple of days here. You should get an email from our webinar system. Thanks again, David. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and stay tuned for future webinars from Intelice. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.